Leadership is like a muscle. The more intelligently you train, the stronger you get. This is a quote from John Ryan, the CEO of the Centre for Creative Leadership. So how do you intelligently train to become a stronger team or transformational leader? In this presentation, we will look at 5 practical strategies that leaders frequently use. These strategies reflect the 70-20-10 rule of leadership development. This rule states that approximately 70% of leadership growth happens by doing, in other words, practicing new approaches. A further 20% occurs through developmental relationships, which includes getting frequent feedback and help from others. And an additional 10% occurs through structured training. The first strategy is to understand the basics of team and transformational leadership. I would recommend that you use the 5 practices of exemplary leadership from Kouzes and Posner as a framework to understand transformational leadership. For team leadership, I would recommend that you use Susan Cogler-Hill's conceptual model of team leadership and her supporting Team Excellence and Collaborative Team Leader questionnaire. Methods you can use to understand the basics include walking through the learning resources we have provided, undertaking additional reading, and discussing these concepts with knowledgeable people. An example of applying this step would be to read more about the 5 practices of exemplary leadership by reading the best-selling book, The Leadership Challenge, reflecting on its content, and discussing it with a mentor who excels at this form of leadership. The second strategy is to know your strengths and weaknesses and your developmental focus. Reflecting on your own strengths and weaknesses as a team or transformational leader is a good place to start. However, you may have some blind spots. Accordingly, I strongly recommend getting some feedback from colleagues who frequently see you engaging in leadership in different contexts. The purpose would be to identify strengths you could build on and weaknesses you can address. An example would be a leader who has sought feedback from their colleagues, reflected on that feedback, and concluded that they need to focus on using the encouraging the heart behaviours more frequently when they lead project teams. Being clear about the types of leadership challenge you are likely to face in the foreseeable future also helps you to focus. For example, if it is likely you will need to lead virtual teams over the next few years, that is, teams that rarely meet face-to-face, you may wish to focus on building knowledge, skills and confidence in virtual team leadership. The third strategy is to use real leadership challenges as practice fields with a clear developmental plan. Imagine you're about to lead a significant project team that will operate for 6 months. You have identified that you need to do a better job at building shared visions and monitoring the performance of your teams. You decide to use this team leadership opportunity as a practice field to try new approaches. With the help of a mentor, you prepare a simple leadership plan that documents your developmental objectives, what actions you plan to take, and how you will get feedback from team members. Prior to each team meeting, you review your plan to remind yourself to take opportunities to try new approaches. The fourth strategy is to learn from others. Options here include learning from more experienced mentors, specialist leadership coaches, or simply observing role models. Part of the art of leadership is to identify how to apply textbook approaches within a local culture. For example, challenging the process is part of transformational leadership, but leaders need to determine how to challenge the process in a way that's culturally acceptable and effective. Observing local leaders who excel at transformational or team leadership will help you learn. Local mentors can also be of great assistance. Even ineffective leaders can be helpful. For example, imagine you're in a team where you report to a particularly poor team leader. Why not use this as a learning opportunity to identify what they are doing wrong and what you would do if you were faced with similar situations? The final strategy is to get feedback, frequently reflect, and have a learning mindset. Feedback is a critical part of the leadership development process, but sadly, many potential leaders avoid seeking it. It usually inhibits their growth. Elon Musk is one of the world's most innovative leaders. He is the founder of SpaceX and co-founder of Tesla Motors and Solar City, to name just a few of his leadership activities. With respect to feedback, he stated, "I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better." Whilst there are many approaches to getting feedback, one of the simplest is to identify a small group of colleagues who work closely with you. Brief them on what you are practicing and periodically discuss with them what's working and what could be improved. So, do you want to improve your team or transformational leadership ability? If so, apply these 5 strategies through your individual leadership development plan. To recap, they are: understand the basics of what team and transformational leaders do, know your strengths, weaknesses and developmental focus, use real practice fields with a clear developmental plan, learn from others, get feedback, reflect and have a learning mindset. Psychologist and educational reformer John Dewey once stated, "We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience." So as you try new approaches to leadership and get feedback, reflect on what's working, what is not, what you are learning, and what you plan to improve. The principal philosophy behind this approach is to see feedback as a learning opportunity rather than criticism. In other words, to have a learning mindset.